Can you give us a little bit of an insight about what your disability is?
I'm Charlotte. In terms of my disability, somewhat of an invisible disability. I have a hearing loss for which I wear hearing aids in both ears, and I was diagnosed around when I was about 5 years old.
What made you decide that you wanted to be a disability advocate?
Sort of fell into it. I've been very fortunate to have quite a strong education since I was diagnosed. I went to a high school that was well known for its deaf integration program, and so as I move into mainstream spaces, uni and the workforce, really increasingly aware of how that specific access and inclusion within high school, but also that I've gotten through disability programs. I want to empower other people, especially those with disability, to have the same sort of access and empowerment.
You'd say you spoke at the UN in New York.
At one point, I was hearing everybody speak, and they're like, "Oh, okay, does anybody want to speak?" In the back of my head, I was like, "Yeah, like I do." I mean, there's one young person throughout the whole panel. I looked over to Sky, the CEO of Hydra, and I was like, "Can I?" And she was, "Yeah, like go for it." I was like, "Hi." I just sort of felt like I needed to give an impromptu speech. None of the conversations that were happening in the civil society were talking about things like inclusion and diversity within disability advocacy, but you weren't talking about how to do it. You don't just need to consider them a box on the checklist. You need to actively be talking to the people, co-designing with them. One of the great things about it was that after the whole session, I just got like warm to people afterwards. They just came to me and I was, oh my God, people actually listen. I met incredible people that I'm still in contact with now.
Were you nominated for a Young Australian of the Year?
I was indeed.
Being in the room on that night, did you meet anyone with an inspiring story that maybe changed your perspective on life or in your disability advocacy?
What really struck me that night, the winner of Young Australian, who was Butta, he really struck to me as embodying an Australian spirit. Seeing Butta, he founded organisations to help multicultural communities. There's just so many incredible people in Australia. Every year, the organisations say nominate somebody in your community. There's plenty of people who are nominating it, but it's actually, Australians are incredibly humble. And so I feel that part of like the Australian culture, but I think it's so important. Now I'm like a massive advocate for really just nominating people in your life.